Hi, my name is Lou Agosta. I am the author of a couple of books on empathy, including A Rumour of Empathy, which is the name of this series of podcasts, A Rumour of Empathy. Today, I am excited and delighted and inspired to have as my guest Liana Allison. Liana is the founder of the Institute of Empathic Leadership. She's an empathic leadership coach, businesswoman, spiritual healer, an intuitive and empowered empath and empathic individual. Leanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Lou. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm really delighted to have the conversation with you today. Let's just get right into it. Tell me about yourself.
Wow. Where I'm at the moment is I am a empathic leadership coach, as you stated. And where I started from is actually, I grew up in a sheep and cattle station in remote South Australia, which was very harsh country. And in that environment, I found that I had a very soft, empathic nature. I was very emotional. And in that sort of environment, and when you live in that environment, people are tough. You've got to be tough to survive that sort of environment. So it wasn't really encouraged in me. And that started my journey in actually not only being a businesswoman, a mother, a wife, obviously. I also learnt in that journey how to use my mind really, really well. But it also showed me that it wasn't my true nature, and I became quite ill physically, and my mind started to do the whole mind loop things and go crazy, and my emotions just exploded. Like I had no control over them whatsoever. So it was like complete mess. So that started my journey in understanding myself and my empathic nature, and being an empath, and understanding how emotions and empathy work in our human system, and how to make that actually a really, like my own superpower, and rather than being a victim to it. So once I've started that journey and started learning, and I did so many different techniques, and I started my own healing center, I did massage, I did all sorts of things to try and figure out who I was. And all of those things added up.
Let me interrupt you at this point, if I may. If I may interrupt you. Because you've said a whole lot there, and it's really rich. I mean, I can think of at least 3 directions which we can go in that. I want to hear more about what it's like to grow up in what I guess we here, I'm in the States, you're in Australia. We should have called that out for the benefit of our viewing audience. But what it's like, it sounds like I would use the term outback. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Totally, yes.
What it's like to grow up in an environment like that. But also, I mean, you said something about what you had to deal with, making you ill at some point. And I mean, if it's not too, so, hold that one thought about growing up in the outback. I want to come back to that. I also want to hear about the struggle you had with what you described as your illness. And, for the benefit of our viewing audience, there is I don't know whether we would call it a theory or an approach, but sometimes a man named Henry Ellenberger, developed the idea of a creative illness, that a number of not just, I would say, famous people, in some cases geniuses, in some cases just powerful innovators, everyone from Freud to the psychologist, physiologist Fechner, to Carl Gustav Jung himself, at some point had some kind of a breakdown. It looked like an illness. And they came out of that with renewed energy, innovation, and creativity. So I want to come back to these 2 points. I mean, I call them out so I don't forget them.
Beautiful.
Now, I acknowledge I'm talking too much, but
no, it's fine.
Let me ask. So let's take them in sequence. I mean, so here you are. young Liana with large mammals? Did you have a lot of communication with large mammals on a cattle farm? Horses,
Yes.
cows? What was that like? You're small, they're big.
It was
Uh,
amazing. I had a real connection with animals right from the start. I was always able to really connect with animals, and I could understand animals, their nature, and how to work with them effectively. So more so with the horses, because it was such a large cattle station, that in itself sort of kept them at a distance. But the horses we worked with every day, and the dogs, and the general farm yard animals. But the horses, and that I was one of those people that I always got the horse that no one else could deal with, because I knew what was wrong with the horse and how to actually solve that issue, and help a team situation happen between the horse and the rider. So it was something I just did naturally. I didn't really think about it. It was, I thought everybody did it, to be honest, and I didn't realize it was different until many years later. But it was one of the joys of my life, is to connect with animals and to be able to really understand them and understand what their issues are and what they need to feel safe around us as human beings. And that's always a joy, I think.
well, say more about that. I mean, this we are interested, I think, in human beings, but not only in human beings. I mean, we share. You know what? I mean, this is mainly about you, but one thought that I've been known to put out in the world is that not only all human beings are related, but maybe even all mammals are related. Anybody who has a dog or a horse, for that matter, I don't have a horse, but I've had pets, dogs and cats and so on. I'm a city boy in that regard. Know that they share feelings. So I don't know. I want to just press you a little bit. What did you know? What was the takeaway from your? I don't want to actually say what did you learn. That's maybe a little too sticky. But what's the takeaway from your in this existential encounter you had? And it
I,
seemed to have a talent.
I think one of the takeaways is our responsibility as human beings towards animals, in regards to how we see them and how we respect them. I know for certain, like I had a dog once that's now passed, but she was a beautiful little dog, and she always had these back issues. And I took her to the vet, and I could never find anything wrong with her, and everything seemed fine, but she constantly had these issues where she was in pain. And
Mm.
what I realized,
Back issues, you said. I want to make sure I got that. Issues with her
yes,
back. Okay.
yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. So she was in pain, and she used to have trouble walking and things like that. And what I thought one day empathically was that my back sore, and my back was sore for the stress and everything that was going on in my life at that time, because the muscles were so tight. So I took responsibility for that issue myself, and I solved that issue myself. My dog never had a back issue after that. That's how connected we are with our animals, and they are with us, because they care
Well,
about
let's
us.
hit the pause button. Let's hit the, I mean, I'm going to pardon me for interrupting, and I want to hit the pause button on this. Your dog has back issues, and you can see by the dog's behavior that it has back issues. It's in pain, it's going up and down the stairs or whatever it's doing, jumping, and is in pain. And meanwhile, you're aware of pain in your own back.
Yes.
Say more about that. What's I mean, I'm going to stutter just a little bit. I mean, there's a theory. I think it is a theory and not a proven fact of mirror neurons that we want to honor the colleagues at the University of Parma, 1995, Vittorio Galesi and Rizzoli, mirror neurons that. When they were working with macaque monkeys, when the one monkey sees the other monkey grab a peanut, the same muscles go off in the observer as in the actor.
Mm-hmm.
Here you're the observer. I
Yes.
mean, whether it was mirror neurons or not, there was some neurological, physiological resonance. It doesn't have to be mirror neurons, but that's kind of the scientific footnote for
Yes.
those in the audience. And so So you're experiencing what the dog is experiencing.
Well, the dog was experiencing what I was experiencing.
Okay.
Yes.
We think it.
Well, that's what it appeared
Yeah.
like from the external, because
Yeah.
I was the one with the actual back issue. Like
I
I
see.
actually did have something wrong with my back.
Yeah.
The dog never had anything wrong with its back. It was like the vets did every test you could possibly think of, and there was nothing showing up in as a physical reason the dog was having these issues. And you could see by the way it was walking and that it was a back issue. So
So, I mean, this is very stimulating to me, if I may say so. In the dog was providing you with a service, in a
yes,
sense. It wasn't trained as a service dog, but it was naturally providing its mistress, or in this case, showing you what your issue was
exactly.
at a very elementary, basic physiological, neurological level.
Yes,
And you
exactly.
had to have the wherewithal. At some point, you had to have the, I don't know. I mean, how did it occur to you that maybe the issue was you?
Because I'm such a sensitive empath, because I can feel emotions and other people's emotions very, very easily.
Yeah.
I've learnt and I've trained myself over the years to be able to do that more consciously. And there's no scientific way of proving that I do that. I guess, I mean, there may be, but not that I know of. And I basically just sat with my dog and connected in. What I call connected in is just open up my feelings to, and my mind, to asking the question, well, what is it? What's causing this with this dog of mine? And there was just the sensation of knowing that it was me. So I started looking at me, thought, all right, well, if it's me, I'll fix me, see if that affects the dog, because I was just guessing. I really didn't know. It was a hint. So it was about me taking responsibility for myself and stop ignoring my own symptoms, doing something about that, which helped the dog. So for me, it was very much about not just taking care of the dog, but initially the lesson of taking care of myself properly first, so that it doesn't impact others, let's call it.
And
Yes.
the tough question, I mean, this is not a softball interview, Leanne, and it's okay if you don't know the answer, but the tough question, which I think a lot of people will be asking themselves at this moment, is what what brought you to consider the possibility that it actually was about you and not about the dog? How did you come to, I don't know how else to put it, to shift your relationship to yourself? Here you are, surviving, operating a cattle ranch. I don't know how old or how young you were. It might be useful to consider that also.
Yes.
And how did you come to think, well, maybe it's about me?
At that stage, I was probably around about mid-30s at that stage. So it was after I'd left the cattle station. But I always knew from a very small child that there's a connection between humans and animals. I just knew it instinctively. So
Yeah.
I've always seen the reflection of myself in the outside world and what that means, what it's showing me, what it's trying to tell me. I believe that we're all connected, and that includes the animals. And I find it far easier to connect with animals than humans, because animals are quite simple in their emotional content. So far easier for an empath to connect with and not have to deal with the humanistic side of somebody. So, and I've also knew that people and their animals start to act in similar ways when they've been together a long time. So putting all that together in my mind, it just clicked that I went, well, maybe she's reflecting me. Maybe she's showing me something that I'm actually ignoring in myself. And that's how I work
Yeah.
with myself constantly, right, for the last 10 to 20 years, in my own self-discovery. So that was just my inclination to go, well, might be me. Let's have a look at that first, because it's always about taking self-responsibility. And that's what I discovered. So it's always been that natural process for me of inquiry. I've got a very inquiring mind, and I have an expansive, creative way of looking at the possibilities to what situations are and what they mean, and how to interpret them in a way that is constructive for myself and my growth.
Well, that brings us to the heart of the matter, that um, uh, in this narrative, you're already 30 years old, um, and um, and have it that you are an empath. I might say a natural empath, in the
Yes.
sense that you're born, if not born that way, at least you're bringing something to the game that's more innate and natural. How, I mean, I stutter just a little bit here, but the question is, first of all, just let's define our terms. How do you understand what is an empath, a person who you would describe as an empath? And then we can, talk about your self-discovery. I think that would be very engaging to the listener, to help them get some sense, because people are wondering, am I an empath? What is it? Da, da, da. And so how define our, how do you understand what an empath is?
Sure. Well, to me, and I would describe myself, is somebody who actually feels very easily, so very sensitive on the emotional side of things, and is sensitive to their environment. So I'm very sensitive to like going to shopping centers or being around people that are uncomfortable for me. It's not just, I can't just ignore them. I can feel them. Like it's like it's a bit like when you don't just look at the rain, you're in the rain, that sort of thing. So you're actually in it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
always been my case. And I know as a child, I was very self-aware around what other people felt. Even though they were saying that they were fine, I knew when my mother was angry and not saying she was angry, or dad was disappointed and not saying he was disappointed. In that childlike mind that I had, I wasn't putting those words to it. I just knew what they said and what I felt were two different things. And I've always been that way. Now, that is a wonderful ability to have now, because I've learned how to use it really consciously and not have it be a trigger, not be a victim to it. But at that time, I couldn't deal with it. I shut down around about, and I can remember at 3 years old thinking I really need to toughen up, was probably the phrase that would have come around in that sort of environment. Everyone sort of had to be tough. So I had to toughen up and stop being a sook. Yeah. And emotionally expressive. That sort of environment didn't nurture that side of me. So that's when, in that very young childhood time, I decided to shut it all down and turn it all into mental process. So I exercised my brain really well, and it became very, very strong and powerful. And that led to the next part of my journey, which was at around about mid-20s, starting to get sick and my body starting to try to tell me that I was actually denying a huge part of my natural nature. And I do believe I was born with it. It's always been there. So, and my environment certainly didn't encourage it. So it's kind of something that was already there that was trying to be squashed down. And by around about 25, it's trying to break out and expose itself, and it actually just balanced me out a little bit more. Does that answer your question?
It really does. I mean, and it opens up a whole another series of questions, of course. I'm imagining an early environment in which you got inbound messages coming at you to toughen up. It doesn't sound like it was in any way a situation in which there was a lot of room for feelings and affections and affinity. Was it, in your family of origin, were people openly affectionate? Were there, could
No,
people hug one another or say things like, I don't know, I love you, or
no,
various versions of it? So that wasn't, I mean, that wasn't possible, or
exactly.
at
It
least,
wasn't. It
yeah,
wasn't.
it didn't seem to be. And so, I mean, I get a sense of the kind of the pressure building up in the boiler, right? And it's got
Exactly.
to come out at some point, and you start experiencing whatever you experience, the negativity, the illness, and at some level, I mean, it may have been a creative illness if handled. It sounds like you handled it in such a way as we're able to, I mean, what is the expression? Given lemons make lemonade. It looks like you've succeeded in making some lemonade. But the challenging part is, can you pinpoint any moment or any series of related moments in which you came to an understanding that, hey, um, this is what I'm experiencing is, as you've used the word victim twice, right? I mean, that there's something I have to survive here, and the way I'm going out about it is not
Mm.
causing either survival or much less flourishing. And
Yep.
what shifted? What are you able to, I mean, I think that would be of interest to get some sense if you can.
Sure. And I know from around 25 to 30 years of age, I gradually got sicker and sicker. When I say sick, my body was, it was started off with simple things like head colds and sinus infections and sore throats
Yeah.
and sometimes chest infections, those sorts of things, all in the upper respiratory
Sore
system.
throats, yes.
So that was gradually getting worse and worse and worse. And at the same time, I could feel my mind getting more and more stressed. My mind was um, turned into a perfectionist. And so the amount of stress that was going on in regards, because at that time I was buying and building tourism businesses, so big business, and I was very good at it because my mind was really great. But towards the 30 years of age, my mind was starting to overdo it and overwork and have complete breakdowns.
And so it sounds like, I mean, no, a bold statement, the obvious, your system, your bodily system, and, mind, body, self, your total mind, body, self, was dealing with the stress, and it got to a level where the system was in breakdown.
Exactly. It was in breakdown. And when it started to break down, my emotions just broke open. So the tight hold that I had on my emotions and just cracked. And I would cry at the drop of a hat. I would cry about the most inane things and have absolutely no off switch. So it got to that stage where I just decided one day, I just said, I've had enough. I've got the perfect life. I've got the husband, I've got the 2 kids, I've got a successful business. I'm good at what I do, and I'm unhappy. So that's when I decided I needed to find me and what I meant, why I was here. Why was I on this earth? If it wasn't to do all this stuff that I'm doing,
Yeah.
because I'm not happy, and even though it was all fantastic and I love my boys and all the rest of it, I was not happy. So I had to decide and make that choice in that moment to find out who I was, what I was, and why I was here. And that started the process of looking for somebody who could help me. And I found a beautiful doctor who wasn't just a GP, but he was also an alternative practitioner. And he gave me the choice. I could go down the line of psychology and antidepressants, or I could go down the line of energy healing and self-discovery that way. And some instinctive part of me said, no, I do not want to go on antidepressants and psychology. I have no issue with them. I believe they help people as required, but my journey was in the other direction. So
Yeah.
that's where I went, and that's
Great.
when
Well, this is more of a transformational moment.
yes,
It sounds like what really shifted there was your understanding of yourself.
yes, that was the gradual process. That was
Yeah.
the gradual process over a few years of becoming self-aware and to actually understand who I was mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, so that
Yeah.
I didn't even know what energy was. I didn't have any concept that there was even a part of us that were called energy. To me, I was a very practical, headstrong farm girl. You know, you get out there and you do what you got to do and take the actions and all the rest of it. But the other side of me that was like, I didn't even know what intuition was. I didn't know any of that sort of thing. So it was a complete opening up of a different possibility of what could be a part of me. And I think that was the key thing, is that world opened up to me at the right time where I was ready to receive it and actually try to understand it. And I'd not only understood it, I could feel it. So I now understood all of the things that I felt as a child. I could now feel all of that and understand it on a mental cognitive state, so that it was a conjoining of my mind and my emotions within my, let's call it, energy system. And that set me free. I felt like I'd been set free.
Yeah. What I wonder, I mean, just to kind of try and put two and two together here and see what comes up. I mean, you're suffering at point A, at time T1, you're suffering from stress and a situation you described, managing a large tourism business. Yeah, I get it. That's stressful for sure. And at time T2, a number of things happen, which you've described in some high level detail, and you're managing stress better. Or let's put it this way: the the energy is no longer manifesting itself as stress, but as um, productive accomplishment, whatever that would be.
Well,
Um,
the difference was, I was always doing productive accomplishment. That
mhm.
was, did that with my
Okay.
mind. But what
Yeah.
this did was it opened up the part of me that was able to feel, because my feelings had been shut down. So what this did is it allowed me to open up my feelings, not make them wrong, not to judge them, not to say that they're useless and have no place in my life, but to incorporate them then in my daily life and in my business to help me and support me, rather than using so much energy to keep them trapped. I opened that door to allow them to actually then support me, guide me, add a different dimension to my life and how I did life. So it was then far more expansive. It was an expansive feeling. So I would use that part of me to guide me in my business decisions, in what it was, how I wanted to do business, rather than like 7 days a week churning away, and ignoring what I needed as a person.
Yeah.
It was more about, okay, so I'm going to be successful at business, but what do I need as well?
Yeah.
And my feelings helped guide me in regards to what I needed. Now, in saying that, when I first opened up, my feelings exploded. Like, it was very messy in regards to sad, angry, crying, a fair bit of stomping around the house. That sort of thing happened, which is so normal, but it's something I'd never allowed myself to do before. And that in itself allowed my environment to change. So as I was changing, I was making different decisions. So my environment was starting to change around me. My business was changing. My family was changing. Decisions about how we do, our family life was changing. So over 5 years, all these changes were happening, and I was growing more and more confident in myself as a holistic being rather than just my mind. I was being more whole and more of my nature.
Yeah.
And the more I did that, the more actions I took with it, the more confident I got. So I was then able to talk about that more with other people.
Mhm. Would I have to be sensitive to the time? I mean, we have a good 15 minutes at least left, and I want to fast forward through, um, if I may say so, some of the stomping around the house, which a little stomping can go a long way, and into every life, some stomping may usefully occur and come. But I want because to fast forward to your current life and current contribution. It sounds like, among other things, you had to get in touch with your own feelings, and that was pretty dramatic, and maybe even at different moments. I mean, cathartic and uh, I don't know. There's some fancy words for all of the stomping here, but basically dramatic. It sounds
Yeah.
in order to enable you to give you power, if I may say so, over your own feelings in order to help others get power over whatever they're dealing with, including their feelings. Usually, emotions are on the short list of things that make us human, and that
Yeah.
can be difficult and challenging. I mean, for so many reasons. So I want to introduce that turn in the conversation at this point. I think maybe a good way of saying um, what I mean, I'm not even sure what I want to ask you, except to say, hey, I'm inspired, and I get it. I mean, empathy lives. You're describing something where one has to have empathy for yourself in order to have empathy for others, and
Mm-hmm.
it starts going around in a circle there. It sounds like you got some empathy. Um, I've been known to say the natural empath can't get no empathy, but it sounded like this general practitioner who you spoke so warmly of, and not only that, I mean, that's how you describe it, gave you a good listening at a key point in your life that
Yeah.
made a difference for you. And he
Yeah.
saw who you were and didn't try to impose an outcome, and gave you the freedom to without knowing what you were going to do what you had to do. And
Yes.
so fast forward to the present, where you have founded an Institute of Empathic Leadership. Say more about that. What's that about? How do leadership and empathy come together? That's a question.
Yes.
That's a tough question, but help me understand. What's the intersection of leadership and empathy?
Well, and it's been my journey. It's where I am now, and it's what I want to inspire other people in the world to really think about and to consider. Because empathy, to me, powerful empathy or being empathic, is about taking responsibility for yourself first, taking emotional mastery and responsibility for your emotions. It's not about, let's call it, being a victim to other people, blaming other people for how you feel, what you do, the decisions you make, making it all your responsibility, your own point of, you've got choice. You may not feel like sometimes you've got choice, but it is always your choice on how you behave, interpret, and action what you want. Now, as an empath, I use my emotional software to guide me in regards to what I want to inspire other people to look at. Empathy in leadership is about listening, caring, non-judgment, and actioning with a sense of self-responsibility. So leadership in many forms have been about I'm in charge and I know best, and let's do it this way because I've got the vision and that's what's going to happen. Empathy includes in leadership about it enhances the team of leadership. I don't believe leadership is one person. I believe leadership actually expands a team, and that you can only have a really functional team if you're not getting hooked into the team's dynamics. the individual person's issues and the individual person's way of responding or reacting to different triggers. So as an empathic leader, we can be responsible in the way that we're not getting triggered by our external stimulus. We are taking total responsibility for how we feel, what we think, our choices, and how we project them into the world, so that we are really being very singularly powerful, but community-based. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it makes me want to follow up and give you an example, just to see what your guidance would be. Um, it, so, for example, I mean, you've used the word power, and power and leadership are closely related in business and in relationships and in so many areas of life. What would empathy say about, um, let's be specific, about two different possible cases, about a fellow worker who's a bully? I mean, bullying is abroad in the land. Here in the
Mm-hmm.
States, you know, I mean, in politics, it's chest thumping and bullying, and there's a lot of different ways of describing it, but a good one is it's people are behaving like bullies. And
Yeah.
so how, without, I mean, the challenge, I mean, there's a lot of challenges there. Your thoughts, how does empathy address, what can empathy bring to making a difference in the face of leaders, co-workers, leaders, I mean, you pick one, who are bullies? And the risk being, I'll just say one more thing and then be quiet, the risk being of becoming a bully myself. If I take on a bully, how can I do it without becoming that which I already despise?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing is, I've always had this number one rule: never match energy for energy. So if someone's being a bully, I never go on the same wavelength as them. I never turn into a bully or put up. It's like two bulls bashing heads. It's a waste of time. It doesn't actually really achieve anything except for sore heads. So, and that's a cattle
Yeah,
station analogy.
that it will. I got that. Yeah.
So, if you're dealing with bullying in the workplace, I would say the number one thing is if you're getting triggered by that and feel like you're a victim to the bully, you have to look at why you feel like a victim. And bullying usually happens to people who are not able to stand in their power and to be strong and confident within themselves. So there's a crack in the armor that the bully gets into. So if we look after the cracks that we have and build our strength from the inside out, we don't actually ever get to deal with bullies because they're not attracted to us. And that's the long-term personal growth view. In the moment view, if a bully comes to me in a workplace and they're having a go at me unfairly about something, I would basically turn it around and ask them why. The person who asks the questions is the one that's in charge. So I would not get triggered because I don't feel myself to be a victim to a bully. And I would then ask them, well, what's going on with you about that? What's that about? I don't see that, there's an issue with me. So why do you think I should be, doing more work that's not justified, or whatever it might be? So it's about standing strong mentally, emotionally, and physiologically, and reflecting back to them what they're doing in a way that is not confrontational, but inquiring. So you've got a sense of curiosity about wanting to know more about them and what's going on for them. They usually fall into a pile of self-doubt if you do that.
What I think the guidance is sound and even powerful. I wonder, I mean, not to be too easy on you here, Leanne, because when I think back in my life and various situations in which I had it that I was being bullied, I was, usually someone is not in the moment in touch with my power. Being bullied at that moment, if I were in touch with my power, we could redescribe the situation a lot of different ways, and
Yes.
it wouldn't be as bullying. But let's say the boss or the supervisor actually has power and is threatening to give me a bad review. And I don't want a new job. I mean, I don't want a legal case. I don't want to open a ticket with the human resources department. I want to do my job. Whatever, let's say I'm in the IT department or something, pushing some IT code or whatever. You choose your alienated labor of choice. I still need a paycheck. Um, I mean, this is, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but I'm asking for further
Mm.
drill down, if you will. How do I get, I mean, easier said than done. How do I get in touch with my power? I think it's a great idea. Ask a question, right?
Yeah.
That's a good, in the world of tips and techniques. That's is there a question here
Yeah.
to kind of deflate, take some of the energy out of the situation rather than go head to head? Because that, as you
Exactly.
say, is just sometimes it's just what the bully wants. He or she, mostly he, but sometimes it doesn't matter gender, is getting off
Yeah.
on the aggressive behavior. I mean, can you think of any other, here I am, help me out, man. I'm not in touch with my power. What else can I do in the face of bullying to get in touch with my power? Ask a question. That's a good guidance. Get a question going. Um, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. I mean, this may not be a fair question, but what are your thoughts here?
Well, to me, it's always about if you're not in your power and you're getting bullied, the first thing to do in that moment is to get in touch with, like, to come back into yourself, because quite often when we get bullied in that, our mind stops working really cognitively, and we get quite often quite confused or
Yeah,
stressed, and we lose some of our functionality. So the number one thing I would always say to somebody is
yeah,
to take a breath and come back into their body and
yeah.
get perspective of, this isn't life-threatening. It feels like it's life-threatening,
Mm.
but it's not life-threatening.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting observation. That's an interesting observation. A person can be put into a quasi traumatic state. Even it
Yes,
may not have to be a full blown trauma. I mean, but it's almost a quasi breakdown. And there, one's power is draining away, and one needs to. I mean, I would paraphrase what you're saying as take a time out.
yes,
Yeah, even if, I mean, you could try declaring a timeout. Wait a minute, we need to have a 2-minute cooling off period, or this one calls for a 24-hour cooling off period. I mean, to just make the claim or make the request. Now the bully's going to do whatever he is, but the request is still in the space.
exactly.
And so
Yeah. So,
I paraphrase what you're saying there, and
yeah, and that's it. The way our minds work, when we're under a certain amount of stress and the chemicals kick in and all the rest of it, our mind goes into the fight or flight mode. And when we do that, it at some part of our brain goes, we're in trouble. There's a lion after us, or there's a tribesman with a spear running after us. It's that basic part of our brain really kicks in, and when that does, it's very hard when you're not self-aware to deal with it consciously, which is why the actual process of dealing with that situation is a process over a period of time of self-contemplation and self-awareness and change within yourself. So look, doing what I do pretty much is to teach people how to become powerful, teach people in their own individual ways how to own who they are in an authentic way that gives them a sense of confidence about themselves. Because quite often the people who are bullied do not have a deep sense of themselves, and do not have the confidence to stand up and say, no, this is not okay. I want time out, or why are you speaking to me in this way? What's the outcome you want? Really putting it back onto the boss, let's call them, and really turning the situation
Yeah.
around.
Is there a request here? You know, what is it you're requesting? I mean, sometimes that'll interrupt the interrupt the funk and interrupt the process and restore a measure of equilibrium. And frankly, what I want to say is restore a boundary
Yes.
because the bullying is a breakdown. I mean, one definition is it's a breakdown in the bound. It's a kind of boundary violation, or at least a boundary issue that this person is not bullying unless somebody uses devaluing language. I mean, peers can get into it, but when there's a mismatch in the authority,
But the
it
thing is,
can
we
be
also got to look
violent.
at, Lou, is it's the
Yeah,
boundaries of the person that's getting bullied. If they've
yeah,
got very soft, weak boundaries of how people should behave around them, and they don't stand strong in those boundaries through their values and their beliefs, then they're very, in Australia we call it wishy-washy, and very fluid in letting people get
it's the
away with
states
behaviour.
also. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we let people get away with
Well, I think
behaviour
that
that's over a long period of time, it gradually will get worse and worse and worse, because it's trying to teach us to stand up for ourselves. Everything that we experience outside of ourselves is actually an opportunity to learn where we need to grow as an individual, where our boundaries are soft, where we're not living by our values, are our beliefs in cognitive acceptance around the values, those sorts of things is where we start to get messy and very unclear in who we are, how we do life, and how we want that to pan out in our actions. So that's why, to me, it always starts with what's
well,
inside of us and how that presents outwardly.
mm. Well, I think that's brilliant, and I mean, I gotta make an educated guess that that's an important part of the service you provide individuals. I mean, in a specific detail, how to set boundaries, establish boundaries, as you say. Don't be wishy-washy. We speak the same way here in the States, and at the same time, don't go get crazy about it and become overly aggressive, or even, God forbid, a bully oneself,
Yes.
imitating the very behavior which we need a lot less of in order to cooperate and build teams and succeed in creating that for everybody. So this might be a good point in time. We have a few minutes left to really. Oh, this is just one example, but to broaden it up a couple levels and speak a bit about the service you provide and how people can connect with you and your work should they wish to do so.
Yes.
So take
Well,
a couple of minutes.
thank
Take
you. Thank
take
you.
two.
Um, so
Yeah.
what I do, as I said, I do talk about boundaries and values and beliefs and that sort of thing. But that is to me, a really easy process to teach somebody and to help them to get clear on what their own personal area of that is for them. The trick is to have the emotional mastery to enable clear boundaries and values and beliefs. It's the emotional mastery where people get triggered. So we might be really clear in our boundaries and our values and what we believe in life, but if we're not emotionally responsible, then we will get triggered and we'll be reactionary in that sense. So what I do is I help people to really clear away the emotional debris and learn how to not judge emotions, but also to have them as a superpower, let's call it. Because, for example, anger is our most creative energy that we could possibly have. And if we clamp anger down, we can't, our passion and creativity and our action levels drop considerably. So the people who are not achieving what they want in life, who also say, I'm a really nice person, I don't get angry, are denying that huge amount of energy that we have in that area of our emotions. So I teach people how to use them really constructively so that they can get the most out of life. And if people want to learn more, they can actually find me on Facebook. My page is the Institute of Empathic Leadership. They can find me there. They can find my website, which is lianaallison.com.au. So that's lianaallison.com.au, because I'm here in Australia. Or you can just email me at contact@lianaallison.com.au. There's many ways of finding me. Just Google me. I'll turn up somewhere.
Well, we look forward to finding you frequently. And Liana Allison, I want to say that in your case, the rumor of empathy is no rumor. Empathy lives in the work you're doing and the work at the Institute for Empathic Leadership. So I want to thank you once again and say I look forward to further conversations with you. And I want to thank the listening audience for their attention and encourage them to reach out with any questions, comments, issues, or requests that they may have for you or for myself.
That would be
Thanks.
lovely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure, Lou. I've really enjoyed having a chat with you, and I do look forward to having more. And it's been an absolute pleasure sharing my journey and hopefully inspiring others.
Okay, on that thought, thanks so much. Signing off.
Thank you.